rather than consuming fast with a phone and not thinking about what you're eating, sit down, put the phone away, speak to the family, enjoy your food as a family, eat it more slowly, because that way there's a kind of axis between your gut and your brain, and there's hormones that are released from the gut that hit the brain that will tell you when you're satiated and happy, your appetite is good. If you eat too fast, that signal doesn't engage as fast and you'll overeat.
Hello and welcome to Sweet Liberation, where today we are so grateful to be joined by Professor Naveed Sattar, who is a specialist in cardiometabolic medicine, and he joins us all the way from the University of Glasgow. Hi, Naveed, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Nabila. Very good. Nice to join you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very well. And we're so blessed to have you on Sweet Liberation today. We're so excited to have somebody of so much knowledge to explain and debunk so many things that we have questions for. So, Naveed, tell us a little bit about your journey into cardiometabolic medicine. What does that mean? And kick us off with what excites you about this area of medicine.
What excites me, I tell you what excites me in part, excitement isn't the right word. It's actually what's really needed. I mean,
Right.
so over the last 25 years or 30 years, actually, in terms of NHS and health, we've done really well in the UK and many parts of the world. We've actually reduced cardiovascular disease, particularly, because of blood pressure targeting, cholesterol targeting, less smoking. The thing that's gone up though in the last 30, 40 years, of course, is obesity. And the thing that's also going up is diabetes. And linked to obesity and diabetes is multiple other complications like kidney disease and heart failure. So we're now in an era where we have so many people living with several conditions linked back to their obesity, potential diabetes, and ectopic fat. And that's a major issue for many high income countries. So that's, in a sense, I don't know if that excites me, it's a reality.
Sure. Mm.
And I have the privilege of, I've worked in diabetes, I've worked in cardiovascular prevention, I've worked in lipids, blood pressure, and of course, I've done lots of trials and research in these areas. And I've had that privilege of connecting things that allows me to perhaps see things that other people necessarily don't see immediately about the linkages between diseases and what the upstream risk factors are and how we can really improve them. So, and I'm trying to, bring that knowledge to guidelines, to various other, studies and trials that we are doing around the world and also within Scotland.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, for sure, I'm also come from a healthcare background in midwifery, and I'm also seeing that, and from observing and looking at the patient groups coming through, and it's just you've been around this area and in healthcare for a long time, so it's just in the last 2 decades, it's incredible what we're seeing. In obesity. So tell us what your views are on the overconsumption or the consumption of sugar and how that links back to all of these health conditions. What do you think the link is? Because we seem to have done really well with getting rid of smoking. And we've reduced the amount of smoking that people are doing. The prices of cigarettes, well, we've priced it out of the market. But sugar is very, very cheap and available everywhere. What do you think about that, and what you're seeing in your research and clinical work?
Yeah, I mean, so the evidence base is the following, Nabila. Let me give you the evidence base. It's um, sugar, refined sugar is not something that, we need in excess amounts, clearly. Um, but it's one of the triumvirate of issues is like too much refined sugar, too many fatty foods and salty foods. And what are companies selling because they can make more profit is sugary, salty, fatty foods is one of the triumvirate. And people's taste buds from a young age are being, in a sense, forced to be adapted to these kind of tastes. And what then I find problematic in clinics are not, it's not problematic, that's the wrong word. What we want to do is empower our patients, in clinics to perhaps retrain their palates to have less refined sugar. So, for example, sugar, sugar in your tea or sugary drinks, um, less fatty meals and less salty meals, and potentially move more towards fiber, plant-based foods. if they can, because those, that's where the clear evidence base is as well. Um, as an example, I've gone through that own journey myself. I have a very strong family history of diabetes. Both my parents, my uncles developed diabetes in the 30s, and I'm now 57. Um, and I've still not got diabetes. I suspect I will develop it, but if I develop it at 70 or 80, I don't really care, because at that stage, it's not going to cause much harm. Diabetes is much more harmful when you develop it young. It's a completely different disease. So, as part of that, of course, is to try and reduce. And I don't not have sugary stuff. I do. I have a few occasional chocolate or something like that, but it's much less. But 25 years ago, I used to have 2 sugars in my tea. I used to drink sugary drinks, but I've retrained my palate now to have tea without sugar. And if I put sugar in my tea, I find it now repulsive. It's the opposite. So that's gone through a process of change. And people listening out there who are drinking sugar in their tea or coffee or having sugary drinks, we should give them the empowerment that actually they can retrain their palate. It might take some people a little bit more longer to cut that sugar down, for example, in their, and their palate and their taste buds gradually will adapt to different levels of sugar, and eventually, hopefully, for many, having tea or coffee without sugar, as an example, or not having sugary drinks. So, that's kind of been my journey as part of a journey. The other thing is, for example, I used to have very sugary cereals, but now I actually like shredded wheat. I don't know if I can see a branded version, but no, initially when you start eating shredded wheat, it tastes like cardboard, but my taste bud I've got used to it. Okay, to add a little bit sugary taste, I do cut up into 3 or 4 grapes, but 3 or 4 small grapes, it's not very much sugar, and it contains some of the other nutrients that fruit provides. And that's enough. Then I'm starting to have a little bit of fruit and fiber. And, in a sense, I've retrained my palate to have far less sugar in my diet. And that, as well as having far less fat, has been has allowed, and plus finding ways that I can, but I have to be physically active, because physical activity burns, sugar, because we do need sugar, as I'm working, but it burns some of that, stocks those spikes of sugar in my body. So those changes have allowed me, and I'm very fortunate and privileged to have stayed probably weight stable for the last 20 years. Whereas before, in my 20s and 30s, I've put on a bit of weight, but I've now lost a little bit and stayed stable. But as you get older, you have to try progressively harder, because you lose a bit of muscle mass, you put fat in the wrong places, and that's what reality happens. So, yes, I think as a low-hanging fruit in terms of diet, anyone listening who does have sugar in the tea or coffee or drink sugary drinks, they can adapt, but they just need to have that competence. It takes a little bit of time. And it's the same with adapting to having less sweets, less, sugary snacks, etc. People can adapt to having less of those by retraining their palate to enjoy some of the other things in life.
Mm.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such practical help as well, and something actionable that people can do straight away. I can
Yeah,
see
I mean, I'll just say this, Nabila. This is based on evidence base. There's a wonderful lady uh, um, did this work back in UCL, uh, you know, 20 years ago. Kids who didn't like cucumber, tomatoes, they were given tiny bits for 2 weeks. And over those 2 weeks, a lot of them started to enjoy that taste and texture. It took
Mm.
2 weeks. So people listening, for some people, it might be a few days, for some people, 2 weeks, for some people, 4 weeks, just to,
Mm.
and that journey might be slow or fast, but they just got to try. And if
Mm.
one way doesn't work, try cutting it very gradually over
Yeah.
time. And adaptation is what we need. That's the thing I would say in Nabila. If people listen, hear nothing else, people can adapt to better quality food, but it just takes a time, and maybe try one thing at a time to improve your repertoire of the food, that quality food that you eat.
yeah.
Sounds, yeah. Can I ask a couple of quick, well, there's actually a point that I wanted to make on that, actually, that's just quite interesting to sort of follow on from that. And that was one of the things that I've tried to do is cut sugar out of things like coffee. And what I've been doing is I've actually developed a bit of a trick, and that is to say that if I've got milk in the coffee, that there's actually enough sugar within, or sweetness within the milk, and that I'm convincing myself that the coffee is now sweet enough because it's got the sweetness from the sugar. And I've actually kind of telling myself that, because I know I wanted a little bit of sugar. I mean, I'm my backstory really is when 3 years ago I was having 5 sugars in a cup of a drive-through, and and I remember Nabila saying to me, "You've got to stop having 5 sugars in coffee because it's that sweet and bitter, isn't it?" And it was trying to balance that. Actually, before, also the other thing I was going to also say is that I was keen to hear that before we came on air there was that you mentioned about cycling, and I used to race a bicycle, and there's always that challenge, isn't there, on a bike where you're trying to fuel efficiently and what you should be eating. And I know some of the professional cyclists talk about coconut oil. What are your sort of views, and how are you sort of managing your feeding, as it were, on a bicycle?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not really, cycling to the level of an elite athlete. For me, it's about 15 minutes into work and a quick
Oh,
race into work, a quick race out. But every weekend we go, um, with friends, we do like 20, 30 miles, and we'll stop for a coffee and stuff, So when I have done long, 80 miles, or so, as a kind of, as an attack, fortunate to have done some of those things. And
yeah.
there, clearly, you do need sugar because, you're burning up so many calories, and you know what the athletes do, they take those little pockets. So, but then they're obviously burning it off immediately. So
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, and let's be honest, if I cut to the chase, diabetes, or unhealth and weight isn't just to do with refined sugar. It's sugar. Sugar comes in lots of tasty stuff like chocolates and cakes, but it also brings with it lots of fat.
Yeah.
And the combination of refined sugar and fat is what puts on weight, and in excess. So the key concept for people is, as part of the journey to cut sugar, you want them to gravitate towards better quality foods, trying to maybe bring in one piece of fruit into their diet if they're not eating fruit. Maybe take an apple, maybe a banana, get, a tangerine, a few grapes. It doesn't really matter. And then with an evening meal, to have less carbs, that, for example, potatoes rapidly turn into sugar. You know, potatoes should not be one of our 5 a day. They're not one of our 5 a day, in fact, because, and white bread rapidly turns into sugar in the body. So it's it's having those mindsets of having, maybe I should have less, refined carbs, and if I have some salad in my plate in the evening meal, and get used to trying to eat some either cucumber or tomato or pepper or onions or whatever, or lettuce or cabbage, whatever people find, a third of their plate or half their plate should be those things. That means you'll eat less of the pasta or the potatoes. That then means that you're shifting that balance towards a bit more fiber, a less sugar, a less fat.
Yeah.
And even a 5% shift in that might be enough to stop people putting on weight. And remember, fiber is the gut's lubricant. It keeps the gut healthy, better microbiome, or whatever, if you believe that kind of stuff. I'm not fully convinced yet, but I think it may be well be true. So, those are the things. The quality of the fuel that we eat dictates the quality of the health of our blood vessels, our pumps, pipes, organs, and our systems inside. And that's the reality.
That's amazing. So
I, I,
such actionable steps. Yes.
and one thing I would say, Nabila, I do lots of work on drugs, statins, blood pressure. But the more I've done research, stepping back, I think we've underestimated the impact of diet and lifestyle and activity on outcomes.
Yeah.
Because we can't do those trials really easily, we tend to put that evidence in, and lots of clinicians put lip service to it because it's easy for them to prescribe a statin or a blood pressure. But actually, wait a second, blood pressure, there's several things that affect blood pressure: salt, activity, weight, and alcohol, as an example, that we can change. But the point being, we have underestimated, and as part of your podcast, getting people to think about the sugar intake as part of that, then to think about their other diet aspects, and giving them really small, simple, sustainable changes that people can make is the way that we should be, the direction of travel we should be trying to go.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I think people listening, it just gives us a kind of food for thought, pardon the pun, but I think just to be able to kind of know that our palates have been adapted to this bliss point, that
Yep.
the manufacturers have very much created this laboratory created bliss point to make sure that we go back more for more and more and more. The brain is just triggered to keep to be insatiable with these foods. And And, then we have a amount of these foods that are so readily available everywhere. You can't get away from them, and they're so cheap. So
Agree.
we got rid of the cheap cigarettes. Now we've got the cheap food everywhere, and it's nearly impossible to stay away from it, isn't it? I mean,
It is, and one of the things, maybe another point I would worth getting in just to people listening, because a lot of people still have this. We judge. We have all, and I probably have done it until I've understood the data. We judge people because they're overweight and living with obesity, and we shouldn't. You have not lived in their shoes. You don't know what their challenges they faced. And as you said, Nabila, very nicely, as you walk down most streets, every second or third shop is trying to sell us fast food or cakes or biscuits or coffees or lattes. And it's very hard. And what people don't realize is our genes haven't changed. There are so many genes that dictate appetite. But what's unmasked that potential is the environment's become more obesogenic. So 50 years ago, the gradient between genes and BMI was not that strong. The genes haven't changed, but what's changed is the availability of food, sugary, fatty food. That then has led lots of individuals who've got more genes for not being able to control their appetite to succumb to eating those things. It's not their fault. It's very hard. So we got to remove the stigma of judging people who are living with obesity and giving them a hard time. We absolutely have to do that. And I say that to colleagues and physicians, because a lot of my colleagues still don't see that. Say, well, listen, I lost weight. Yeah, but that's fine. You live in a nice area. You can walk in nice places. You can buy good quality foods. You don't live in the shoes of somebody who lives in a poorer area with food deserts, etc., with less walkable environments. We shouldn't judge people, and that's really important as well.
I absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So tell us, are you still working in clinical practice, or are you mainly based in the university now? What's the kind of what is your main work?
I do both. So I did a clinic on Tuesday. So I've seen people who come in predominantly with abnormal blood fat levels, lipid levels, cholesterol levels. But also as part of that, many of our patients are now living with obesity. Many of our patients have got hypertension. Many of our patients have got diabetes or existing cardiovascular disease. So it's really a cardiovascular prevention clinic. But over the last 30 years ago, it used to be purely lipids and smoking. This now shifted completely. We're now seeing much more people with obesity, many people living with obesity that leads to abnormal blood fat levels. And what I'm very good at, and I've tried to train a lot of people, I think I need to get lots of colleagues to connect the clues where we can measure things, where we can see evidence of ectopic fat. So the blood triglyceride, the liver function test, the sugar, hemoglobin A1 is a measure of diabetes, and the waist circumference. If you bring all those things together, I was teaching one of my other consultant colleagues, look at that pattern. That is telling me, even before the patient arrived, I could see the results on the screen. I said, I think this patient's got a BMI is probably a little bit high. And here are the clues that tells us that. And guess what? The patient comes in, the BMI is 31. So we can then tell the patient, look, I'm seeing signals in your body that's telling that the weight that you've reached is now leading to stress in your body in terms of the fat is in the wrong places. Your blood pressure is a little bit high, particularly the diastolic. So we now need to empower them to improve their lifestyle. But of course, it's hard in the environment that they're in. It's not easy. They don't want to be a BMI 31, but that's what they are. One of the things we can do is that simple, some people, when the penny drops about retraining their palates, gain confidence in one change. Look, I can cut sugar in my tea, even if it's from 5 to 2. I've managed that to that change. Then I have the confidence to try something else. Maybe I'll now start eating a bit of fruit. Maybe I'll now try a bit of salad. And they can go through that step change, and suddenly they stop putting on weight and perhaps lose a bit of weight. And that's how the journey begins. That's possible for some people. I don't think it's possible for everyone because their level of habituation and where they live and all these other things are different.
All the environmental factors.
Exactly. But we can make a difference if we give the advice for small goals, small sustainable goals. What tends to happen is many people will go through Christmas, say, I'll have Christmas, okay. And then in January, I'll go a complete life shift. Doesn't happen for most people. They do that shift, they lose weight, and then they'll bounce back up again.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing diet the wrong way. I think for the majority, it's small steps, sustainable steps. So it's a kind of, it's like step up. That's how we got to a certain place. We have to step down gradually.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, some people can do it fast. and sustain it, but not many can.
No.
So,
It's that bounce back effect, isn't it? It's just too hard, too fast, and then you start your brain hasn't quite adapted to this, and then you're craving all the things.
exactly. You're completely
Yeah.
right, Nabila.
I'm putting my hand up as I think on this journey, so many women, could probably echo that you've kind of maybe done yo-yo diets all of your life in that kind of cycle, and that's the reason they don't work is just, you end up craving all the things and then
Yeah.
having all the things.
Yeah. I know. And the thing I would say, Nabila, even this, I'm not saying this is the answer for everyone. It may not be, okay? Because what we'd forget is these appetite signals are complete, there's a complete variation in individuals. Some of those signals that want, sugary, fatty, salty foods is very strong. So it might be very difficult for them. So we should never give people a hard time. What we need to do is empower people to try at least.
Yes.
And to tell them this is what the journey might look like for changing from one type of food to another, and that give them the confidence to at least try that change, but
Yes.
and also to give them that confidence that change might be initially hard, but once you get over that period of hard, the initial kind of uh, barrier that it's hard, that actually it might start to get easier, and then you get to a journey from A to B, where B is actually just as enjoyable as A was, but it's healthier. Like me having my tea just now with a little bit of milk, but without sugar. Whereas 20 years ago, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, big spoonfuls, So and I enjoy it just as much.
Mm.
Yes.
That's the journey, is that you can get to somewhere where you will enjoy your diet just as much, but you've learned to enjoy something that's healthier with less sugary stuff, less fatty, saturated fat, less salty stuff.
Yes.
That's the journey we need to help.
Can I actually make an observation as well? One of the things that I've seen, I don't know what your thinking is around this, but I actually believe as well that I see a lot of people eating, but they're not consciously eating. They might be looking at the television or they might be looking at their phone, and they're actually eating, but their focus isn't on what they're eating. And I think when you decouple that, you're not actually aware, and that's probably also a sort of almost an overeating syndrome. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, you're completely right. Look, I tell you, one of my colleagues who's on the cycle with me this morning, he's just back from having a long holiday,
Ah.
and in a camper van with his wife and his dog. They went down through France and Spain, and he came back and he said to me, said us this morning, we were having a quick coffee before I came in to work. I didn't see many people living with obesity, or far less in France and Spain. It's because they have more of a family culture. They sit down and eat together,
Yeah.
They take their time, they make better quality foods. The problem in the UK, I mean, maybe this, or even in the US, is we've lost that family sitting down, taking our time and eating foods. And you're completely correct. On the iPhone, and the phone is a bad thing. Sleep, exactly. Looking at this, not concentrating on foods, not enjoying the taste and texture, and just eating fast, consuming just to get rid of that satiety signal, so we can get back to our short attention span and whatever it was we were doing. So you're completely right. Food should be a journey of enjoyment, and I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. I don't have a perfect lifestyle, absolutely not. But it's definitely better than it used to be, and I do need to make it good because I've got strong. I've told you already, my family history of diabetes. I've got to try harder than the average person. So you're
Yeah.
completely correct, Luke, 100%. So ideally, get rid of the phone. Maybe don't watch TV. Sit on a proper table. Sit with your partner or your wife or your friends. Sit and have a proper meal. Make a salad together. Talk
Mm.
about things. Those are the kind of things that people want to do. And the other benefit of that is actually getting rid of our phones, because the phones are addictive as well.
Yeah.
Everything in life at the moment is made to be addictive, to consume, to either, look at information, eat fast, consume calories, and not to do things, enjoy and slow down and smell the roses, as it were, and see the con.
Yeah.
And it's corporate greed. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
I don't know how people change that. I don't know, but that's completely another story.
Mm.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think we've done some traveling over the last 18 months, and we've seen it as well, sort of in Spain, where, I mean, I come from a Latin American background, so we're big, family eaters, a bit like Southern Europe, everybody around the table, enjoying meal times together. And it's just a completely different approach to eating. Really, fast food is not something that we do, as a habit. It might be something you do occasionally. And the types of foods that we buy and have in the house is completely different as well. So yeah, from that point of view, are you seeing a lot more people that are having obesity problems also linking that to mental health and anxiety disorders as well?
So that's a really interesting question, Nabila. I mean, we've just started to write a review of all the evidence that, in terms of, so what I think I'm very, I wouldn't say good at, that sounds a bit too, self-congratulatory. What I've realized though is that you've got to look at the totality of the evidence that exists. So that includes observational data, genetic data, intervention data, trial data. And because I've had that privilege of working in various guidelines and trials and clinical practice and epidemiology, I can see good evidence when I see it. I can also see rubbish evidence. So clearly, when people put on weight, their mental health is affected because they look at themselves and they look at people looking at them. There's that kind of stigma. They feel it. In fact, I did a talk recently in Crete and I talked about the stigma and I said, actually, we shouldn't blame people. And a young girl came up to me who was living with obesity, said, thank you for saying that. Because I don't, thank you for explaining to other people that I don't want to be living with obesity. So she was obviously thinking all of her life, look at people looking at me with 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 uh, with a view that I'm lazy or you know there's something wrong with my character that's led me to this. Whereas you've nicely explained to them all that that's not the case. So clearly that stigma and mental health issues is there. And
So,
when you help people lose weight, they feel happier, they're healthier, they've got more energy, they feel better about themselves, better self-esteem. Clearly that's the case. In terms of anxiety, I don't know if there's a causal link and which direction that goes in. I don't think we've done the randomized trials. And the same for depression. We haven't. There is clearly bits of evidence that obesity, living with higher BMI, is linked to more of depression. But is that cause and effect? Because some of the treatments for depression lead people to eat more. So it's really difficult to. What you need to do is proper high quality randomized trials, and I think those are beginning to start to happen. So we'll find that out. But the bottom line is, there are more trials now coming in this space to help people lose weight in different ways, and we'll see what the evidence shows. But yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
That's brilliant. What I'm seeing as well, I don't know if you're seeing this, Naveed, is that there's a lot more enthusiasm within the health professions now to look at lifestyle. Are you finding that amongst your colleagues and your peers?
Yes, and I've with a few colleagues, I've written a few papers recently explaining that actually we, as collectively, we've been slow to interpret what's happened because it's happened so fast. We've had lots of medical success. We've got, as I say, statins, blood pressure, less smoking, less cardiovascular deaths. We've also got brilliant treatments to keep people with many conditions alive a lot longer. We've got biologics for uh, rheumatoid arthritis, new drugs for heart failure. We heard yesterday the breakthrough for asthma. All these things are great, but that means more people living longer with more obesity, leading to more conditions. So we've now got lots of people living with what's known as long-term multiple long-term conditions. And one of the major drivers of that is actually obesity. And clearly there are these new tools, like semaglutide, Wegovy, and Manjaro, and people are kind of pushing towards them. But we can't just wait for people to get to live to give them these drugs. We can't just do that. We have to do prevention. We have to do better lifestyles because by the time you're eligible for one of these medications, you've already got lots of damage in your body, which is not necessarily recoverable.
No.
So we really do need to do prevention and give better lifestyle advice at the same time, which includes, less refined sugars and less fats and less salt, etc., etc., etc.,
Mhm.
Yeah,
and better quality diets.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, and I think I totally echo and agree with you. And in terms of, for people listening, if anybody wants to make those changes, yeah. So the small steps, look at the tiny little changes you can make that don't feel like big changes,
Yeah.
and that then makes them sustainable. Because as you said, a lot of people, we get to the new year, and there's a sort of evidence, isn't there, around you get to about the 21st day in January, and then the whole sort of New Year's resolution goes out the window. So those little changes and knocking back maybe the little bit of sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I would also say I don't really like Christmas and New Year. It's too much temptation to overconsume in every single possible way, um, and maybe we do sit down as families, but we overeat. I mean, and of course, the temperature and the weather is not so conducive to be physically active, so it's really tough.
Yeah.
And alcohol adds fuel to the fire, alcohol in excess. Um, so, I mean, y- rather than people having to wait till January and don't go on food or other types of binges over Christmas, maybe what people should try and do is if they can walk a little bit more, if they can add a little bit more fiber to their diets, if they can just have a little bit less and eat more slowly. And one of the things you said is rather than consuming fast with a phone and not thinking about what you're eating, sit down, put the phone away, speak to the family,
Mhm.
enjoy your food as a family, eat it more slowly, because that way there's a kind of axis between your gut and your brain, and there's hormones that are released from the gut that hit the brain that will tell you when you're satiated and your appetite is good. But if you eat too fast, that signal doesn't engage as fast, and you'll overeat. So
Yes.
eating slowly with the family, enjoying the food, and then going for either a walk before or after is kind of the kind of simple tips you can do. And it doesn't need to be a long walk. It could be like a 5-10 minute walk. Every 10 minutes is 1,000 steps, 40 calories. You know, just go for a 10-minute walk with a family member after, and that will burn off 40 calories. It will reduce that spike in sugar in your body. It'll stress your pancreas less, da 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 da, da, and so on and so on and so on.
No,
So small, simple tips just to try and get you through those periods, before spring steps in, and we can hopefully enjoy better weather.
exactly. And I think that's fantastic advice. And I wanted to kind of just touch on a little bit, Naveed, on what you're seeing in your clinics. Are you seeing younger and younger people coming through? Because you touched a little bit on age and what happens to the body with diabetes. So tell us a little bit about that. People that don't understand the mechanism of diabetes and then the impact of this uncontrolled blood sugar
Yeah.
on the body.
Yeah. So sugar we do need, it's the fuel that we need for our brain. That's why when you're sleeping at night, your liver is making sugar because you need to it feeds your brain cells and it feeds your immune cells. So we do need it, but we need to keep it within a certain level. Once it starts to go high, it sticks to proteins and all over the body. So this, that proteins on your blood vessel lining, proteins that, those blood vessels that supply your eyes or your kidneys and the big blood vessels supply the heart. It also, diabetes is also a disease where people have excess weight. So the blood pressure is high. So there's a volume stress, there's a sugar stress, there's excess fat in various organ systems. And all these things combine to lead to more eye disease, kidney disease, heart disease.
Mm.
What diabetes is, some people misinterpret it. It isn't just about excess sugar in your diet, it's actually your weight you reach. If you put on excess weight beyond which you can store that weight safely, at least in metabolic terms in the periphery, that fat then starts to permeate into your liver. And the liver, when it gets too much fat, makes too much sugar beyond the body's needs. And that's the problem. So however you get to excess weight, if you've gone beyond your certain threshold, your sugar level will start to rise. So I'll give you an example, make it really clinically apparent. I'm now at the point where, I know that if I put on another 8 kilograms or 6 to 8 kilograms, I will develop diabetes because I've measured my sugar levels and it's a straight line between my body mass and my sugar levels. So I'm below the threshold where my diabetes will kick in. If I put another 8 kilograms, I've kind of, I'm got to close to my threshold where I can store fat safely in my periphery. So I've almost overcome my safe stores. So if I put about 6 to 8 kilograms, that fat will go into my liver, and the liver gets too much fat. the insulin that my body makes to keep my sugar normal or keep it controlled will not work as well because there's too much fat inside my liver cells. My liver will keep making sugar in excess my body needs. My sugar levels will go up. I will develop diabetes. So I'm going to try and stay my best to stay this way.
Yeah.
So that's how it works.
Ah, fantastic.
So,
And are you seeing younger and younger people coming through your clinic?
I don't even need to say, I can tell you the evidence. Let's not even, so in 2000, the number of people diagnosed with type 2 diabetes under 40 in the UK the year 2000 was about 1,000. Okay? Under 40.
Wow.
10 years ago, it was 100,000. In the recent report, there's 180,000 people with type 2 diabetes under 40 in the UK. So that is a 180-fold increase in 20 years.
So when we talk about a crisis and a pandemic, this is like a
It's happening.
crisis like we have never seen before in human health. It's an understatement, isn't it? Really?
It is, and it's happening everywhere. I mean, you've got to be very careful. It's difficult. You mustn't give that stigma thing again. That.
Yes. Decouple the people from the situation.
The situation is that the reality.
Well,
The evidence base is the following. And again, I have that privilege where I'm involved in studies in pregnancy. I'm involved in heart failure studies. With my colleagues with kidney disease, with diabetes. I was speaking to a forensic pathologist who was a few days ago. And all those people, when I speak to them, they're all suffering. So my forensic pathologist is saying we've got bariatric type places, and some of them are not even big enough for some of the individuals who are coming through. So they're seeing a lot more pregnancy, reproductive medicine. More women are suffering with obesity that's causing problems for their gestational diabetes, hypertension, preeclampsia is all linked, stillbirth, so on and so on and so on. And the number of people with gestational diabetes is skyrocketing, and so on and so on. In every specialty, skin disease, psoriasis linked to obesity. Would you believe? Cellulitis is linked to obesity.
Yes.
Liver disease, pancreatitis, sleep apnea, everything.
Everything.
So it's happening everywhere. What the ideal scenario would be changing the environment so it makes it easier for people without much conscious effort to lead healthy lifestyles. That isn't going to happen easily. We've got the sugar reduction, we've got the advertising bans, but actually that's only small. There's tons of stuff we need to change in the environment to get us to where we were back in the 1990s and 80s. And I'm not sure that's ever going to happen.
Well, it isn't whilst the markets are driving for these cheap
Let's be honest.
foods. The market is driving that, unfortunately.
So what I would say to people, those people who are shareholders, yes, it's good to make money, yeah, but think about your families as a shareholder. Think about your communities. If you're investing in those food industries or alcohol industries or whatever, think about the welfare of the whole community, including your families, and let's start to have some conscious changes and push from those people who are in the positions of power to say to your food industries, look, let's still make a profit, but let's make healthier foods and less unhealthy foods.
For sure.
That's what we need to appeal to. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. It's not blaming them. Greed is something that, is everywhere, permeates everywhere.
Yes.
So maybe we're the victims of our own biology. I don't know which we want
culture shift, because it's now unacceptable, isn't it, to smoke indoors. You can't just light up a cigarette in a restaurant. It wasn't 22, 3 years ago. That's when the smoking indoors ban sort of kicked in. And then now it's completely unacceptable. And even, people that smoke feel quite isolated around that. But although we don't want to create that environment of shame around food, but if the manufacturers, I think that's the thing, the decoupling, I don't know what you think about this, Naveed, but the decoupling of blame culture on the people, the consumers who are really, they're stressed out. I can give you like a scenario, a stressed out parent having to work maybe 2 jobs to feed the family of children, eating snacks on the go all day long. So many of our healthcare colleagues as well, they're overworked on the wards. They've got maybe a chocolate bar in their pocket. They don't get a lunch break. And, if they can shove that piece of chocolate in their mouth whilst they're having a cup of tea. Or,
calories, exactly.
I mean, it's just whatever they can. And then
Yeah.
how on earth can we judge those people? We can't, because they're so stressed out. But the manufacturers of the food and the policymakers that support those big industries should be certainly taking a long, hard look at what they've done over the last 2 or 3 decades. I mean, those statistics are staggering, absolutely staggering. What do you think about that?
No, they are. And I'm not a politician, so I don't really know. I don't have the power to make, changes. None of us individually do. Um, but I mean, you're completely correct. The reality is the evidence that this is people's fault is now going. So manufacturers now need to realize the truth is starting to become more apparent. That it's the obesogenic environment, it's what you've put in front of us has led to this problem. And we wrote a paper in 2006. I wrote it with my brilliant colleague Mike Lean and a few other colleagues. And in that paper, we wrote, what is provided is what is eaten. So what is provided has to change.
Yes.
That's like almost 20 years ago. And we have to change. We have to change. If we want people, I'll say this again, without much conscious effort to lead healthier lifestyles, we have to provide an environment which propels much healthier foods. Yes, they can still make a profit, and far less unhealthier foods. So it's easier for people to gravitate towards better, healthy foods. It does mean, though, that food industry has to accept to make less profit per capita volume, whatever. They have to accept that. And if they're not willing to do that, well, we know what the consequences are.
Yes, absolutely, and the impact on children's health. And as a midwife as well, I mean, I know that you're talking that you see, you're looking at pregnancy and obesity. I certainly have seen that we actually was in a situation where I would say more than a half of the women that we were booking when I was working in London were now high risk. And
Yes.
more than half now, I would say, are high risk, to the point that sometimes we'd celebrate if we had a low risk case coming through, because I was working in a blood hospital and all those kinds of things. But yeah, it's staggering, isn't it?
It's staggering. Now, actually, one of the first papers that documented the change in BMI in women even booking for antenatal clinic was one of the ones we published back in, I think it was early 2000. And clearly pregnancy is a metabolic stress test, because if you enter pregnancy with higher weight, you're more likely to succumb to many of the complications. But again, we mustn't blame those women. There's a strong deprivation, linked to poorer diets. And that's not the right term, to less good diets, but it's not their fault. Look at the food deserts that those people live in.
Yes.
And it's just a reality. We need to, anyway, we're not going to solve the environment, but I think it's completely correct. But now that we have all of this knowledge, we have to advocate. And I think part of what we're doing just today is, if people are listening, is everybody who's got a position of power can be advocates for better quality diets. Put pressure on your MPs, put pressure on, whoever's in there might even be people listening here working food industry or in politics who can have positions of power. Use that power to try and create better environment in any way possible we can.
Because this situation really is unsustainable for people. They can't have the quality of life they deserve, even if they have a longer life. If it's a poor quality of life, it's something that we must kind of feel responsibility and duty of care as healthcare professionals and enthusiasts and people with, even consumers, to feel that we want to make this world a better place for sure, and for our future generations. So important.
No, 100%. Yeah, completely agree. And it's going to be a long and tough journey, but some governments have got to make brave choices. I quite like, for example, Australia yesterday.
Yes.
Their ban of social media under 16. That's a really brave, but really important step. It's those kind of big card decisions that we need, and I'm glad Australia have done it. I hope other countries follow, because, the reality is sometimes is staring us in the face. And we've got to think about the health of our future generations, and that ban on, I don't know, how quickly it'll get enforced, but it's clearly the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Some families will kick against it, some kids will kick against it, but actually, it's a bit like seatbelts. We're doing something that actually keeps people, gives them better health. That's what we have to do.
You have to do it. Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And yeah, so do you have any, apart from of the amazing actionable advice that you've given and that I think everybody could start right now, are there any other nuggets of gold that you would love to share that is kind of on your heart? You think, I wish I had an opportunity to tell people about this. And
Yeah, no, I mean, like, do you know, as you read books from various people and other things, the best things that come across as people's their own lived experience. Yeah, and and my own lived experience having come through, we grew up in a town which was less affluent, and so I suppose the point I would reiterate is as a young kid, I was exposed to less healthy foods. We owned a local shop, so it was easy for me to eat cakes and drink
all
sugary
the things.
drinks, and yeah. So I didn't have a very good diet, and I am sitting here in front of you, someone who's got high risk of diabetes. I do have a little bit of coronary disease, but it's unobstructed, so I know that. But 42% of men of my age have that as well. But I know those risk factors, and I think that some of that disease is partly because of my family history, but also because my diet wasn't good in my 20s and 30s because of the exposure. But the my journey of having learned to make small steps has really transformed my diet to having sugary drinks every day, lots of chocolate every day, hard sweets pretty much once, to now eating much more fiber, salads, took almost diametrically opposite diets, but I didn't do that overnight. It took me 5 to 10 years to get to that stage.
Yes.
You know? And but the point is, I now love my food as much as I loved it before, but it's just much healthier.
Yeah.
So people, I think, is to empower them to know that many people listening can do that. It just might take a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, but it's just to give them that knowledge it can be done. And the same with activity. With activity, find something that you have to do. So if you commute to work in a car, can you actually, or a bus, can you stop at the stop before to give yourself an extra 10 minutes walking?
Great.
Can you, for example, find a way that you get a podcast and go for a walk after a meal and listen to the podcast? Can you reach out to a friend who's got a dog and go with them for a walk? Find some ways to find activity that you find enjoyable and sustainable, and you have to do. I bike into work every day now, but because I have to go to work. Rather than taking the car, I bike. It's cheaper, it saves me money. But it's not going to be for everyone, because lots of people are scared of the road. But is it a way that you can actually bike in safe routes through back streets and then walk the other bits with the bike? Do you know what I mean? Just think outside the box of ways to get activity in your lifestyle that is enjoyable, sustainable, to change your diet in a way that, and have that knowledge it can be enjoyable, sustainable, but just give yourself one simple task initially, gain confidence, and then move on to something else. And if the first thing doesn't work, try something else. That's what I would say. And don't be scared. If none of it works, doesn't matter. At least you tried.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's brilliant advice. An absolute pleasure having you. And we hope that you'll come back. Professor Naveed, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today. Are there any other questions you wanted to ask Luke before we close?
Well, no, I think that's fantastic. I mean, your insight on this is brilliant, and that's exactly what our podcast listeners want. And a lot of people, once they've heard a lot of these things, they then subscribe and to the channel and everything, and that then grows and it helps us with bringing people like yourself on, which is great.
Yeah.
I think I've got a very similar sort of upbringing. It sounds to yours. We're a similar age. Open access to hard sweets, soft drinks, all of those soft pop that we used to call pop, sugar bowl, open access to a sugar bowl, dessert spoons of sugar over my Weetabix and shredded wheat. I mean, I had sort of a big crust of sugar on top of my, and I probably used to eat 5 shredded wheat as a child, thinking that I was really healthy and with a pint of milk. So, I mean, yes, that actually for me lent to a lot of dental work as a child, and so my passion is all around actually helping, educating the public, get it into children as well, and as you say, making these changes and having salads. And I know Nabila's, made loads of fantastic dressings and things on salads, and the children love it.
The children love it, believe it or not. Naveed, the children, when they come to my house, fight over the salad bowl with their forks.
Yeah.
Get in there.
I-
Because you can make the food so delicious. And I, we are believers in sweet liberation, and just, for everything from our product, but all the way through to the podcast, is to make healthy living easy and fun. Because if it's not fun, no one wants to do it. So we dance.
They won't stick it there completely.
We dance. We dance in the kitchen. We do a lot in discos. And I just think it's something as easy as that. You put a little bit of music on your phone, you're cooking for the family, 5 minutes of dancing in the kitchen, and everybody's happy, everyone's in a good mood, everyone's looking forward to the food, and all cooking together, 10, 15 minutes, making easy meals, and things like that make it easy and fun, rather than this massive mountain that you think, I'm never going to climb that mountain, so you don't even bother trying.
Yeah, exactly. We need to break it up into small steps, and this is something I'm hoping to generate for our Scottish community and I'm hoping to work with Scottish government to do this. So, but I've now realised I've got to this age of 57. I think there's no point. It's lovely to speak to you and spread that message, and a lot of it's common sense that we've all travelled through. Each three of us have travelled through, but I guess the beauty I have is actually also having worked in research and starting to tie that kind of lived experience with actually what the evidence is.
I do want to say one controversial thing, which might be slightly naughty, really. But do you think there's this thing as there's the alienation of research and then just practicality? You are such a practical person, which is why we've loved speaking to you today, because you're just actionable. It's like, this is what the research says, but this is what we need. This is what we can do in small steps and make it really practical. Is there just been too much research on stuff which is basically common sense? Do you think, like Granny's research 2 generations ago, people were not having the same health problems that we have now? I'm just being a little bit naughty, really.
No, it's not. It's always, the most important thing in research is to have a bit of humility and ask questions. What I would say, this is going to be equally research. I think we've got too much research downstream, generating 3rd, 4th, or 5th generation drugs for certain treatments. We've missed the fact that actually what we do need is more lifestyle, proper randomized trials to prove to many of my clinicians that actually lifestyle is much more important than we've ever realized. Obesity is much more important than we've ever realized. So I've got a role that works in government, UK government. I'm the chair of the obesity healthcare goals for the UK government. And one of my pushes for everyone I speak to is that actually, including all the big funders, we need to fund more in the lifestyle obesity space and less, I hate to say it, less in generating the 5th to 6th generation of X, Y, and Z. Because actually that's where the problems are nowadays.
Absolutely. I think you've touched there. I mean, thank you so much for affirming. You're validating I get sometimes, as having come from also a research back, I think, have we just done, I don't want to hear anymore. And we need more research on such. I'm like, actually, Granny did not need the research. She was just feeding the kids basic whole foods. And they were walking around every day. Nobody gave them a randomized controlled trial on that. And they did pretty well.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I completely agree. The evidence was there. Look back to the 1980s, 1 in 16 of the population was living with obesity.
Yeah.
Nowadays it's 1 in 3. It's like,
and nobody had to go and buy superfoods in those days. There was no such thing. They were just basic foods and go out, and we were all walking to school, and then it was just actionable things. Oh my goodness. You are a man after our heart. Thank you so much.
pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure. And we hope that you'll have you back now that we know that you are also got your finger in so many very healthy pies. We should certainly pick your brains again and have you back on Sweet Liberation. And I'm sure everybody listening has got some actionable steps that they can take today. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Naveed, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it.